Hi.
Okay. All right. I see them coming through. All right. Fantastic. We're going to continue on with this session on civil rights continue. Love to hear from you, just pieces that you have already thought about or that you have learned about the civil rights continue. Can anybody put something in the chat? Or if we're able to unmute, would love to hear uh, some of the comments that have been made so far. I just want to kind of get caught up a little bit.
From what I know, the civil rights movement basically
Let's see
set the.
what's in the chat.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Hi. So Joseph, can you, yes.
Regina, can you hear her? Emma was speaking. I don't know if you heard her.
Go ahead.
Can you hear us now?
Okay, so
all right.
Can you
go ahead,
okay.
Emma.
So the civil rights movement basically set the foundation of what we know as society today. Like the civil rights movement has made it possible for people of color to be able to reach their highest potential as far as degrees and things like that. Because prior to the civil rights movement, Black people and people of color were not being treated equally in society. So there was a lot of like protesting. I know about civil rights activists as Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks was one as well, and who else was Malcolm X also, and that's basically pretty much it.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. There's a couple more things that you really want to consider. Number one, the civil rights actually started in the 1800s, but during our time, what really stands out, and it's one of those hallmark times, was the civil rights movement that took place in the 1950s and 1960s, so that we could fight for equal rights, equal pay. And during that time of civil rights, it was not just for people that were Black. It was workers who were being underpaid. There was so many different pieces that were actually a part of that. That's really important. Now, in addition to that, after the civil rights movement, we've got to keep in mind that it was a place to start getting equal rights, but it doesn't necessarily mean that our rights were equal. Because if that were the case, we wouldn't be where we are today. I want many of you to stop and think about, wow, look at what's happening right now. The different things that are taking place, that we're still talking about things like Black Lives Matters and trying to have spaces and places for those who are transgender or whose sexual orientation may be different than the mainstream, either you are heterosexual and that's it. So we've got to look at those different places, right? Yes, so Emma, you said we are still having systemic racism. Absolutely. So when we think about systemic racism, in the chat, I want you all to put down, what do you think systemic racism is? What is systemic racism? So while things are coming in the chat, really breaking down those words and thinking about what it is. Race is the color of your skin. Now, there's some of us that may say, you know what, there are people who claim that I am one race and I'm not, I'm something different. Regardless of what you think it is, you have to remember that race is socially constructed. So that means that other people get to decide what your race is, regardless of what you say that your race is. Now, keeping that in mind, if I did not see myself as Black or African American, and I said that I was Brazilian, I have to still understand, what does it mean to be seen by others as African American? What does it mean to be seen by others as Latino or Mexican or Native American or Chinese? We have to understand, what does that mean in our society? So Emma, you said, I could be Brazilian based on my nationality. Yes, but it doesn't matter when we're talking about race. People are going to determine what they see. So I want everybody to just look at the back of their hand. Just look at the back of your hand and look at that shade and think about the many different racial categories a person can place you in. And when you see that, you now have to do a little bit of homework to understand, what does it mean to be seen there? Even if you tell people all day, I'm not this, I'm not that, it doesn't matter. It's how you're going to be treated and what their expectations are going to be based on the color of your skin. You say, I feel like America, they try to push race on everybody. Absolutely, they do. They absolutely push race on everybody. But we have to also stop and think about where it came from. So it takes us all the way back to that first conversation about civil rights and where all this took place. But before I get into that, I want to go back to systemic racism. So Catherine, you said systemic racism comes in many forms, such as employment, housing, discrimination, government, right? All of these different areas, absolutely. So systemic racism is all part of the system. It is how the system works. So it's much more difficult to get rid of systemic racism than it is to get rid of a person who is racist, because it's bled into everything, like we hear here, housing, government, jobs, the legal system, all through it. But do we have any control over that? Is there anything that we can actually do? And the answer is yes. So we've got to go back and rewind the tape and start thinking about just the fact that when we start thinking about the system and civil rights, we have to start thinking about, what did people do? There were people who would just sit at the lunch table in places and spaces where they say, you're not allowed in here. You're not allowed in here. And people would go in there, but they were trained on how to go into those spaces and places. So when you go to speak up and use your voice over some of the challenges, some of the systemic racism, or when we start looking at how people's rights are being abused, we also have to think about, how do we actually approach it? So let me kind of rewind the tape and talk a little bit about my personal experience with the civil rights movement that took place in the early 60s, right? So I was born in 1964, and I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So when I was there, my family, we lived there until I was like 4 years old. And then we came back to Colorado. And not Colorado, but we came back to the United States. And at that time, we went to Baltimore, Maryland. That is where my family's from. Is anybody online? Do you have family in Baltimore by chance, or Puerto Rico?
No, ma'am, I don't, but I have a lot of friends that are from Puerto Rico.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely love it there. But when I came, so you think about the cultural difference. As soon as I left Puerto Rico and I went to Baltimore, it was very, very different. And my father went to war. So what was really interesting is there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and we had to pay close attention. And it was right about that time when I was there that Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had been murdered. And everybody was on an uproar, because this was a hope. This was all about the civil rights. But if we do not want what his efforts were to go in vain, we have to continue it today. In the session I was just in, the speaker had said, it's the change. We see the change in our children. So what you all bring to the table is what's going to change our society. And so really, it's all about us impacting and affecting that now. So anyway, I lived in Baltimore. My father came back from the war. We went to Taiwan. So imagine now we're going across the waters, totally something different. I had different cultural experiences. And during that time in the early 70s, we went to a place where many of the people that were Taiwanese were not familiar with people with my color skin. So that was just absolutely amazing. Yes. And so after that particular piece, I moved back to Baltimore, and then we traveled from Baltimore to Colorado, and we got stopped. Imagine driving, hundreds of miles. Your children have to use the restroom, and everywhere you look, it says that you cannot actually, go use that restroom at all. And that becomes a problem. That right there becomes a problem. So all the way as we were traveling, it became very, very difficult to get from Baltimore to Colorado. So this is in my time. That wasn't long ago. During your time, you have things that you'll be able to share with other people that really was against the rights of being a human being in the United States. That is the reason why we're continuing with the civil rights. So let me look at some more of these particular pieces. In different cultures, people are not focused on race. People see each other as one due to culture. Yes, that is true, but you have to stop and think, what other ways do other countries divide people? Sometimes it's through religion, sometimes it's through tribes, sometimes it's based on gender. So there are other ways in which people actually see those challenges and those situations. So what are you doing? What are you doing to be part of the civil rights? Now think about it, civil. Civil means that you're not going to go out of control. You're not going to be angry. I mean, you might be angry, but you're not going to express anger to a point where you're going to be disruptive. And all you're doing is trying to make sure that people's rights are validated, recognized, and supported. And so what are some examples of things that you are currently doing? I'm looking, and while you're putting that in the chat, I'm looking at something that Emma said: when you speak, you have to try to educate others on issues that you have been experiencing. Absolutely. And some people say, I'm tired of explaining. I don't want to keep being the teacher. They should already know. That is absolutely true. But we also have to balance that with what is it, how could that be a benefit? And I'm not saying that you should be the educator for everybody either. That's good. Let's see. We all have to disagree or disagree. We can all learn from each other. We all can learn from each other. So I want you to think about it this way. Whatever your experience is, no one can take that away. They might say that's not true. They may get upset with you because of what you're saying, but the truth of the matter is that you had that experience. But the second part to that is that you, and this is all part of the civil rights, you have to also see another person's perspective and see how the two can actually mesh together. Says here, oh, let me see. Amaya, people try to act like they know what you are talking about by relating when they don't have experiences with racism. So I've talked to several people who said that, what they're trying to do is build relationship by saying, I can relate because of this. What I tell them is that you have your experiences, but you can never relate to my experience. This way, you're not discounting them for their experience, but they cannot relate to your experience. And then also keep this in mind, even if you have been impacted by racism, not everybody is impacted the same way. So we have to keep that in mind. Just because you're a person of color doesn't necessarily mean that you've experienced racism the same way. As part of the system, yes, which is really important. The experiences that we experience as Black people in America is different from non-Black. We can't be mad at them for not understanding us. Absolutely. Because everybody's going to say that they've had their own experiences, which is very true. But I will say this, it divides by race. If you say, well, I'm a person who is part of the LGBTQ community, and so I have experienced these, what you're talking about, or I've experienced worse. That may be true, but if there are people of color in the LGBTQ community, then they have yet another layer that they have to deal with, and that is called intersectionality, when you have layers of oppression that you have to deal with. So Catherine, you said my friends and I partnered with my counselor and started a club called Student Supporting Culture to help educate students in our school. It has been doing amazing, and we have over 100 members. Wow, I would love to know what school that is. And then you need to contact me because I'm interested in hearing more about that. I think that that's very powerful. Does anybody know what happens in the year 2111? 2111. I'm going to pause while I read this next one. Okay, so here it is. How would you personally respond to people who have tried to discard your experiences by saying that you are being dramatic? That's a great question. That's a great question that you have right there. I was just reading something, so I apologize. What I would personally do is I would start asking him questions first. Tell me more. What do you mean? What exactly do you mean? Because they'll find themselves talking themselves right into a hole. That's number one. Because the moment that you react to that and you get upset with it, then they just validate, yep, that's what I was talking about. And that is not really true. And so you want to ask them questions and ask them, what point are you really trying to make? You're saying that I'm dramatic. And then the other part to that, which is not as easy to do, is when you get a moment to be by yourself, ask yourself, was I being dramatic? Because how was I expressing it? Because something that I want you to keep in mind, there are people who have the privilege not to listen. They'll listen to you if they want to. So it doesn't matter how angry you get, if you cry, what examples you give. If they don't want to listen, they won't. So why try to force somebody to believe you? Why would you want to do that? So let me just pause for a second. Regina, I was just trying to think about a video, and maybe you have one in mind as well.
I'm working on it.
Okay, perfect. All right, wonderful. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I have that all the time. I mean, I'm 57 years old. I've heard it all the time. You're so dramatic. I mean, you're not the only one. And they have many different things that they want to say, but I don't let them take control of my control. The moment you let them do that, they won. So being very careful about that particular piece, asking the questions. Don't buy into it because that's all that they want to see. So it's really important that we don't do that. Okay, Catherine, thank you. Pine Creek. And yes, please get in contact with me. That would be fantastic. Let's see. I just don't talk about certain things with certain people, just avoid conflict. So race, religion, politics is a boundary that I don't cross with people because a lot of people do not respect each other's belief system. Absolutely. So something that I always do is I gauge what level of conversation I have with whom based on our relationship. So if you have a relationship of mutual respect and they say something that's really deep, then you know at what level you can have a conversation back with them. But again, I don't go too deep. And I think those are the same areas that I try to be very careful and make sure in what situation would I really be having this conversation with anybody. I was at a function, I just moved into a new area and some of the neighbors invited us over. And the question was asked, what are my thoughts on Black Lives, excuse me, Black Lives Matters? And everyone leaned in to wait to hear what I was talking about. I mean, what I was going to say. And I just turned it back around and I says, what are your thoughts? And I never answered them because that question can be loaded and triggering at times. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about microaggressions. So sometimes people would say, no, I don't see anything wrong. I don't know why you're upset. And it's because they may be doing a microaggression. And a microaggression, let's just look and see what that means. And then I want you, while you're watching it, to think of an example of a time when you have experienced a microaggression.
Regina, you need to give me just 2 minutes, please.
Okay, absolutely. So while she is doing that, right here, Esther says, how about when it comes to people using other people's culture, not really to learn or understand it, but only for publicity? How do you respond to people like that? Which in Emma, you did talk about cultural appropriation. And so then that's an opportunity for us to educate, right? But it's how you do it. So you may want to interrupt and ask them, so why are you wearing that? Something from your generation, which I absolutely love, is cancel culture. And sometimes that's when you disregard, you move away from that particular one, especially if it's a high profile product, so to speak. But if it's another human being, you may want to start to ask them questions. So the other day I was in the store and I had my head wrap on and a lady stopped me and she says, I want to compliment you on what you have on your head, but I don't know the appropriate term. She says, would I say a turban? And I said, no. I said, because I would feel like I was doing a cultural appropriation. I said, however, in my culture, we do wear hair wraps. So I was educating her because she really wanted to learn, but her approach to it was respectful too. So all of those pieces all come together. Oh yes, right here. When you wear head wraps, people automatically think that you're Muslim. And that's because they're uneducated. They don't know. And so it's one of those things where, again, it's all about educating. And you may not want to educate right there on the spot all the time, but you have opportunities. This goes back to civil rights. You have an opportunity to educate. That group that was talked about from Pine Creek, having this club, you got a place to educate. You can be a speaker during educating children of color, or you can do something at your school to bring it to a broader space. Do you know that it wasn't until the year 2020 before they had some type of law, which was called the Crown Law, so that people could not discriminate against us because of our hair? That's a long time. So now let's go to the microaggression. So I want you to look at this particular video, and then let's go back to talking about how maybe you have been impacted by a microaggression. And it may not be as obvious as this, but they could be subtle.
Regina, am I muted?
No.
Nope. I'm going to play this one, and then if you would converse about it, then I'll load the other one.
Absolutely, that would be great.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware, Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
Wow. So raise your hand if you've had some experience with some type of microaggression.
Water cream! Bangers and mash!
Wait.
Guinness!
Am I
Yep.
still sharing? Oh,
No,
No.
you're not sharing, but we definitely could hear something. It was pretty weird. So Joshua, I see your hand is raised. Can we unmute? Okay, there.
Yes. Okay. So, I lived in Jamaica up until I was about 10 years old, and then I came to the US. And when I came, I didn't start school right away. And so when I did start school, it was kind of in a weird spot. And I didn't like understand everything that was going on.
Mhm.
And then so the teacher asked me where I left off in school in Jamaica, and I just kind of explained it to her. And then she said, okay, well, she did like really good job of catching me up, but the students, they're basically just like asking me if there were any schools there and if we had to like do schooling outside or like under trees or something. And yeah, it was weird, very weird.
It was beyond weird. It was disrespectful because that's not even a microaggression. That is a macroaggression. They knew exactly what they were doing and what they were asking, which is absolutely a shame, And so it would be interesting to know, how did you navigate through that and get past it, or to be able to work within it?
I'm trying to
Because
help. I'll call you right back.
you're still on unmuted, Regina. Emma, what about you?
Okay, so basically growing up, as far as my foundation in elementary school, my teacher in the first grade, I remember her insulting me just because there was a language barrier, because at the time I spoke Spanish and my babysitter, all what she would speak to me is in Spanish. So whenever I got to the school system, it was kind of hard for me to be able to read and write in English. So she basically referred to me as being retarded due to the fact that there was a language barrier that automatically fell under the assumption that since I was Black, that I didn't speak any other language but English, because in America, the majority here is people who their ancestors have been dropped over here. And I had a lot of kids asking me, oh, do you speak African? Where are you? Where are your parents from? And I kind of really found it disrespectful how everybody thinks that Black people are automatically supposed to be from Africa, and slaves were passed over not just to Africa, all over the world.
So here's something to keep in mind. Thank you for sharing that. When you hear people do that, including counselors, teachers, then you have to realize that they are uneducated and miseducated. People only provide to you what it is that they learned and what they think that they know. So with them asking you that question, it was true ignorance because they don't know. And, you know, one of the things that I always tell people is you may want to look at your history and leave it at that. For them to now have to go through it and read it and examine it for themselves, because otherwise they don't know. You know, if you ask a person right now, what was America like before enslavement? They couldn't tell you. They don't know. And so there's many different pieces of this. People don't understand the difference between, you know, they said, well, you know, Blacks weren't the only ones that were enslaved, and there were other Blacks that were enslaving Blacks. And the truth of the matter is that they don't understand the difference between enslavement that took place in the 1600s through the 1800s, and then what took place indentured enslavement. So they're two different things. Thank you for that. Ruth, go for it.
Okay, so my family origin traces back to Kenya. I came to the United States when I was 3 years old. So around 5th grade, that's when Ebola was really happening. Like everyone was hearing about it in the news. And even though Ebola was mainly concentrated in Liberia, a small country in West Africa, a lot of my classmates, they just heard the word Africa and they thought all Africans were having it. So, you know, every time we talked about Ebola in class, they would kind of like start staring at me. And then some people, they even started making rap, or they'll start rapping about it. And then they'll look at me, and I had to like talk to my teacher about it, and she had to talk to them about it, you know. But it really hurt my confidence at that time, because when you hear stuff like that, it kind of makes you feel ashamed of your identity and your culture overall. So that's how I felt at that time.
People don't realize the damage that it can have on other people. The keynote speaker right after lunch, he talked about that. He talked about how it just continues to go in your brain every day. This is something that we have to constantly live with. And it's not easy. It's very uncomfortable and it's very, very painful. But we have always risen above because of our strength. And one of the things that we have to think about is that there's a lot of miseducation. It is truly unfortunate, truly unfortunate. You know, yes, so Alana or Lydia, she said, that's like when COVID started, a lot of the world pointed at Chinese people a lot. Yes, so if you think about it, it can put people in danger. It can lower people's self-esteem, their confidence, all different types of things. And this is why we have like the educating children of color. It's really important to do that. So it says here, it's really sad how the school system only just teaches students about slavery, yet can't teach the students cultural awareness. Exactly. And I don't even think that what we learn about enslavement, because first of all, if they're going to teach it, they need to use it by its right term, which is enslavement. It's not even slavery. We have to stop calling people by the crime that's been committed upon them. And so there's so many different pieces to it. And many teachers are saying, I can't teach that. I don't know enough about it. Well, when you get educated to get your teaching certificate, that should be part of that curriculum too. So if I can make sure to fill out the evaluation. Yes, so if you look in your chat, there's a link for you to go ahead and click on for, you know, to do the evaluation. Make sure that you do that. I want to address something that came up earlier, and it was about box braids, you know, and the person who said it, they said, well, you know, if I see like a person who has white skin wearing box braids, it doesn't really matter to me, but some of my other friends who are black skinned, it bothers them. So when we think about the box braids, what makes the box braids a cultural appropriation is because when we have worn those braids, we were not socially accepted, we weren't hired in jobs, it wasn't seen as being attractive. And so that was a problem. So if another race wears them and people say, oh, they're beautiful, they're wonderful, then they're not really understanding the challenges and the struggles in which people who, this is a natural hairstyle, have had to go through and struggle with. So this is probably why somebody else might be upset about it. The best thing to do, because the person who's wearing the box braids may not have been doing it just to be mean, but they need to be educated as to why that's a problem. So when I was a kid, wearing braids, it was said, wearing braids, you look like a slave, right? So we tried to avoid it when we could. That was, we didn't know any better, right? But there was a movie that came out, and I think it was called The Blue Lagoon, and it had Bo Derek, who was a white woman who was a model. And she came out the water with box braids, and everybody thought that she was absolutely beautifully stunning. And that is cultural appropriation. So you're not even looked at for your own cultural representation and looked at negatively for that. Esther, go ahead.
I'm in this class called Avid, and in my Avid class, we talk a lot about this like every day. Every time we have like any conversation regarding this topic, it always comes up about the box braids, especially in our generation. It's just where a lot of people don't really put in the time or the work to understand the history of why they can't do certain things or why it affects certain people. And I remember this one time I went to an interview and I had some long box braids. Like, I'm still in high school, and the lady was like, "Are you gonna keep this braids if we hire you?" And I'm just like, yeah, it's my protection. Like, this is my protection for my hair, so yes, I'm gonna keep it. And then she was like, "If we hire you, we're gonna need you to like take it out or something, because this is not a good representation for the job." And that automatically just set me off, because now online, when you see a lot of kids my age, a lot of kids who are not people of color just get box braids because it's a trend, or because they see as like, oh, if I wear this, like, I'm gonna be a part of the trend, or I'm gonna be up to the latest trend. But they don't really see like the struggle that people went through just to be able to be expected, just to be able to like be seen as people when they have box braids, just to be respected when they have box braids. And that really irritates me, because they don't see that. And a lot of people with other people's culture, it's kind of like, when it comes to the struggle, or speaking of the struggles of Black people or the struggle of the culture that people go through, nobody's there to talk about it. But when it comes to using the culture, everybody's there for it.
Right, right. No, that you're exactly right. And I totally understand that. I don't know when this happened to you, but that is illegal at this time. But that's what happened to me. I did not wear braids for over 15 years because of it, because I wanted a particular job, which was really unfortunate. But now I wear my hair natural, and I wear braids when I want to wear braids. I wear wraps when I want to wear wraps. So it does make a difference. Thank you for sharing that. This is how we educate. So Emma.
Okay, so
Your-
go ahead.
Thank you for jumping in, but your time is technically up, and they have a 5-minute break. They start again at 1:20 in another session. So if anyone wants to stay and talk to Dr. Lewis, you're welcome to do that. If you want to run and get some water and stretch, do that, because you start again at 1:20.
Thank you, everyone. It was fantastic.
Either way, it's like everybody and anybody feels like they can just talk about Black women's hair. Like, I don't understand why people are so invested in our hair. Like, they don't understand our hair texture. And either way, if you wear your hair natural, somebody's gonna say, oh, it's too nappy, oh, it's too kinky, oh, you're wearing weave, you don't have your own hair. It's like, either way, everybody is gonna talk. So, and also on top of that, because I'm getting ready to go off to college, and I'm going to be most likely in a space with non-Black people. I'll probably end up being at a PWI institution. One of my concerns was my roommates not understanding my struggle and my hair texture, and talking about, oh, why is her hair so short? It's called shrinkage.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things. One, I think it begins with us, because we would be the first ones to talk about our own people and our hair. And that is one of the biggest problems. So we need to work in that space and place. The other is to be able to educate and to build a relationship with others. And if they do not want to learn, right, then you need to start asking questions. You know, why are you concerned about my hair? Tell them that it's illegal as well, because it truly is. This always seems to be a problem. I would not stress about it. I would definitely be armed and ready to be able to provide that information. But I know even for myself, you know, when I wear my natural hair, it's not just people who don't look like us who have something to say. It's people who look just like us that have something to say as well. And it's unfortunate, but the reason why people are talking this way is because of what's been shown on the media, what's people are saying, how people react to one another, our entire history. And just remember this, the big deal is that it's the moment that we do anything with our hair, it's political. We make a political statement. I just went to a function and I wore a mohawk, you know, a natural mohawk, and people were all over me. They had something to say. And, you know, I want people to focus on my intelligence more than my hair, but that's what happens all the time. So I have to rise above and show them my mind. Thank you for that, Emma. It was great talking with you and everybody.
It was nice talking to you. This was honestly one of my favorite breakout room sessions. I signed up for this one. I'm just so honestly grateful for the opportunity to even be here, to even be attending the ECOC conference, because I've been able to like connect and network with different people that come from different cultures, different backgrounds. And I'm just so happy to see somebody that's a Black woman that has the title of being called a doctor in itself, because honestly strive to be like y'all. Because a lot of people are telling me, oh, you can't be a dentist, oh, you can't do this and that just because your parents come from this background. And I have a lot of people at times who are non-Black people, because they grew up in the era and the time frame of people of color not being able to receive an education. So they think, oh, you can't receive it in this day and age just because you're Black.
See, I love that. Yeah, you want to build your success entourage. And so my sister, you need to get in contact with me because there's many more. But I will tell you, 2 weeks ago, I had to go into a doctor's office. And this particular doctor is a plastic surgeon. I had a sty on my eye that needed to be removed. And when I went in, her assistant was a Black woman. And she said, the doctor will have you come in now. And when I went in, it was a Black woman. And this woman, I mean, she was dressed fly too. And she did the surgery on me, and tears were coming out of my eye, my other eye. And the lady was like, oh, you know, her assistant was trying to pat the tears. And she said, are you okay? And I said, yes. I said, these tears are tears of joy, because in my lifetime, I have never had a Black woman doctor, ever. And her assistant, I had 2 Black women, and I'm in there Black. So I understand exactly what you're saying, Emma. Surround yourself around other strong Black women who are accomplishing things, because you will accomplish any and everything you want. We are a force to be reckoned with. I love it.
I'm so thank you so much, Dr. Regina.